Hi everyone and welcome back. I'm Addy and today I'm going to talk about 5 things that I think I learned way too late in Italian. This isn't to say that I learned them too late in the sense that, oh my god, it was too late, I couldn't even learn them. It's just that when I reflect on my experiences learning Italian, I probably should have learned these things earlier. I also want to clarify that these aren't necessarily things I was never taught. In fact, some of them I was taught. It's just that I didn't really get them. They didn't really click for me until maybe a little later than they should have. So I'm gonna let you in on these secrets so that you can avoid learning them too late too. Some of them are honestly a little bit embarrassing. Okay, let's get started. Oh, by the way, I run a platform called Ciao, it's Addy, the same name as this page, on Instagram and Facebook, so give me a follow if you're interested in this kind of content. Let's get into it. The first one, and perhaps the most embarrassing, is that I really didn't understand that double consonants had a different sound in Italian. Because in English, seeing 2 consonants doesn't necessarily change the way that the word sounds. Like my name is Addison or Addy, but I think you would say it the same if there was 1 D or 2 Ds. In Italian, that's just not the case. Now, I want to clarify that I'm not the best person to teach you how to make those sounds because I'm not a native speaker, and I do still make mistakes with this, and people will comment on my videos to let me know that. So I'm not going to teach you how to do it, but I do recommend you look up a video on how to hear and produce double consonant sounds in Italian, because it can sometimes be the difference between one word and another word. If I were to give you advice as a non-native speaker, I literally think of making the sound stronger. Like anni. Like I really want to put my strength into that sound. Or like abbastanza. You're really putting effort into that double sound. I've heard some people explain it as having the consonant be at the end of the first syllable and at the beginning of the second one. So if it's abbastanza, it's abbastanza rather than abbastanza. I've also heard some people talk about not so much focusing on making the consonant sound longer, but on making the vowel sound before it shorter. In any case, I'm not going to teach you this because I think that everyone will freak out if I do, but I think you should look into how it's done and start paying more attention to how people make those sounds, because although it's difficult for us as English speakers to perceive and produce, it is something that is very important in a language and does change the way that you're understood. So that was number 1. Okay, the second thing, this isn't so much embarrassing, it's just something that I think is really useful that I didn't really pay attention to before I lived in Italy and spent time talking to people. The verb fare is very versatile. It gets used in a lot of different contexts. You can use fare before another verb to indicate that you made someone do something or let someone do something. For example, this is probably the most common way I see this used. If I say fammi sapere, that's me saying let me know, right? So it's actually the verb fare plus the verb sapere, basically saying make me know, like cause me to know this thing. So if I say fa, that's the imperative version of fare, plus mi, which is the indirect object pronoun, and then sapere, so make me know, let me know. But this is just one example. Fare gets used in all kinds of different contexts with other verbs to indicate that someone has made you or let you or caused you to do that thing. For example, if I say mi ha fatto parlare, that means he made me speak or she made me speak. Il film mi ha fatto piangere, it made me cry, it caused me to cry. Ho aperto la porta per far entrare il cane. I opened the door to let the dog enter, to allow the dog to enter, to make the dog enter. Far entrare. There's a million more examples of this, but I just think it's really useful to pay attention to because it comes up a lot in everyday speech in Italian. Okay, number 3. I was saying Florence wrong. The name of the city, Florence, in Italian is Firenze. I was saying Firenze, like with a very American Z. And one day, one of my close friends in Italy said to me, why do you say it like that? It's not Firenze, it's Firenze. It's almost like that Z sound is actually a TS. Like in grazie, I would never say grazie, it's grazie. The same thing applies to Firenze, and I think this is something that happens to a lot of English speakers. It's not Firenze, it's Firenze. It's a small thing, but I saw a video of myself saying it wrong the other day, and it really irked me. So, something to look out for. It's one of those things that's more or less the same sound, so they don't really teach you when you're learning Italian, oh, this actually is a different sound, because ultimately you're going to be fine. If you say Firenze, everyone's going to understand what you're talking about. But it's one of those like next level phonetic things that once I started paying attention to it, I noticed it a lot more. And I felt embarrassed for having said Firenze for so long, although it's really not that embarrassing. Number 4, there are a lot of things in Italian that are plural and take the plural form of a verb that in English we would use a singular form of the verb for. I'll give you an example. Capelli, right? Hair. If I say, I like your hair in English, I say hair as one singular noun. And so in Italian I would want to say, mi piace il tuo capello, or something like that. But capelli, meaning hair, plural, comes as a set. And so I can't say mi piace I tuoi capelli, because I tuoi capelli is plural. So I would say mi piacciono I tuoi capelli. Or if I want to say your hair is pretty, I would say I tuoi capelli sono belli, with the adjective matching in plurality. It's not that hard to understand, but it feels very wrong when you're a native English speaker to say, I like your hairs, or your hairs are very pretty, plural. So it's one of those things you need to rewire your brain a little bit about. The same thing happens to me a lot when we talk about time in Italian. Because in English, no matter what time it is, we'll say, it's 4 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock. But in Italian, you're talking about hours, and hours are plural. So I would say, sono le 3, it's 3 o'clock, right? So the only time that it's singular is when it's 1 o'clock, and you say, è l'una, L apostrophe una. Or if you're saying it's noon, è mezzogiorno, or mezzanotte, è mezzanotte, it's midnight. But for all the other times, you're going to say sono le 2, sono le 3, sono le 4, sono le 5. This messed with me for a long time. Now it comes a lot more naturally, but just something to pay attention to. Something very similar happens with money. Because in English, whenever we say how much is it, or how much does it cost, we'll probably respond and say, it's $400. It's $1. And it doesn't really matter how much that amount is, we use that singular verb, it is, or it costs. But in Italian, they would say, sono 400 euro. For cost, you could still say, costa 400 euro. But, for example, when you're checking out, they might say to you, sono 15 euro. And that means it's 15 euros. Maybe I'm the only person for whom this is confusing, but no, I take that back. It's not confusing, it's just different. And so it takes a mental rewiring because it's not a direct translation. And when you're first learning, you always want to translate everything directly. I think at the higher levels of language learning, you start thinking about how concepts get expressed in that language without leaning necessarily on how it gets expressed in your native language. And these are some of those things. But they came to me definitely kind of late. Okay, the 5th and final thing that I think I learned too late is that reflexive verbs are really not that scary. I maybe missed a day of class where they talked about reflexive verbs, and then for the rest of the time taking Italian, I thought they were really hard and confusing. But one day I just raised my hand and asked if they could be explained, and after that, it was never a problem again. And the way it was explained to me is that the reflexive verb is usually just a normal verb that now has a reflexive component, which means that the action is being done onto the subject. For example, if you take the verb svegliare, that is a normal verb that means to wake up. And if I say sveglio mia mamma, that means I wake up my mom. My mom is the direct object, okay? She's the person onto which I'm doing that action. But then if I want the verb to be reflexive, so now it's svegliarsi, that's the infinitive form. I would say mi sveglio, which means I wake myself up, or in other words, I wake up. So all I'm doing is taking that normal verb and adding the reflexive component, which is that reflexive pronoun. So when you encounter a reflexive verb, really, you just conjugate it in the same way that you would in that tense normally. Present tense, right? Imperfect. Maybe I want to say mi svegliavo ogni giorno. I woke up every day. I'm just using imperfect and then adding that reflexive component. And the same thing with many other tenses. Mi sveglierò. Tomorrow I will wake up, right? Future tense. Sveglierò plus mi. The only exception is in the passato prossimo, and the exception is that all reflexive verbs get conjugated with the helping verb essere in the passato prossimo. So I would say mi sono svegliata and agree that past participle with the subject, as opposed to ho svegliato mia mamma. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense. This wasn't really meant to be a video about reflexive verbs, but the point is that they used to really scare me. And then I learned that they're really not that scary. And they are a really big part of everyday conversation in Italian. Usually in class you learn them for talking about your routine every day, things like that. But it turns out that reflexive verbs are very versatile and very common in Italian and something to get more comfortable using. Okay, I hope this video was helpful. I hope you don't make any of the mistakes that I made, and I hope that the things that I learned late are now things that you're learning early or on time, and that you won't mess up while you're in Italy or in conversation. But if you do, that's fine. Mistakes are good and they're how you learn. These are just some things I've been reflecting on recently. Like I said, if you like this kind of content, want to hear more about my journey with Italian and being in Italy, just subscribe below or follow me on Instagram and Facebook, or do all three of those things. Ciao, grazie!